A very good evening to all our viewers. Welcome to today's edition of the Evening Review. My name is Toivo Njabela, your host. Tonight on the show we are joined by Jephta Nguherimo. He is a reparation activist who concerns himself a lot with the issue of the Overherero and Nama genocide that remains a thorn in the flesh of Germany that committed the crime, and of course a lot that is happening here in the country. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe if we can sketch a bit of your background and the context why you are consumed by this matter. Of course, we know that you are a descendant of Overherero, but where did you start sort of taking, not only talking, but actually taking action in this regard?
Oh yeah, I'm of course a descendant of the victims of the 1904-1908 genocide, and I'm an educator. I'm also a writer. I authored a book about this genocide, titled Unburied, Unmarked, devoted to those who have been, who died but they have not been buried yet. So I have been in this movement for, I would say, over 20 years. I started, I wanted to make a film about the genocide, what happened, and I interviewed a lot of people, professors and researchers and traditional leaders, but of course, I never produced a film. When finally I interviewed mostly people externally, but I asked myself, like, what is the story of my parents?
Yeah.
So that's when I asked my grandmother, and she talked about the journey of their family during this particular difficult period. And one of the stories that moved me to consume myself was, I asked her, did you get to see your grandmother? And she said, no, I didn't get to see my grandmother. And I asked why. This is on tape, on camera. And she said, well, when the people were now fleeing the German troops, she was too tired to go further, and her brother sent her kids, which is now my great-grandmother, to go forth to keep running while you're trying to help my great-grandmother. But in the end, she was just too tired. Everybody was hungry or tired. So they basically left her alive under a tree. So when my great-grandmother asked her uncle as to where is my mother, brother said, well, I tried with my friends. There's nothing more we can do. And so she asked, do you mean you left my mom under a tree to die like that? And he said, yes, that's all we can do. So that really particular story stayed in my mind. And as to where is that tree, what tree, and what was the fate of my great-grandmother? Was she buried or burned by the German troops, as they have done in this case, or not? So I stopped making the film, and I just decided that my proximity to the story and the pain, the emotions, will not allow me to have a balanced perspective on this issue. So I devoted myself to this, and I have done a lot of work writing a book, and was instrumental in helping finding the lawyers who filed the case that we lost in New York. And recently I also made a presentation at the first permanent session of the United Nations of people of African descent at the United Nations in Geneva, December 9th. And so I have been consumed by this work because it's a personal story and a search for justice.
Absolutely. Engage me, Jephta, on the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which is a United Nations platform which you address in Geneva, just as you mentioned. What message did you take there?
Well, the message was simple that I took there. As you know, there have been negotiations, joint declaration between the two governments that was overwhelmingly rejected. And the tenets of the rejection of the joint declaration was simply because it was not a transparent process, and even the modality, it was not inclusive, and we don't agree with the outcome of it in substance-wise. Even the apologies half-hearted, and so that was rejected. And so, because they have no framework as to what is it, who, and why were they negotiating. So my goal at the United Nations was to ask the United Nations to create, I'm sure they have in other aspects, but to create a framework for reparatory justice. In the case of someone from, let's say, Namibia or anywhere where they have experienced genocide, what are those frameworks? What is the level playing field where we can start from? And so that was my ask, for that to be clear. In the future, if there is going to be a negotiation, we are following those frameworks and those principles, so not anybody will be left behind. So that's my turn.
Absolutely. Who are you? Were you engaging this UN platform as a representative of any movement, or how did you as an individual?
Well, I told you that I have been in this movement for many years. I have written a book. I also participated in a film that was aired by Al Jazeera. And in the process, we have created friends and allies of their struggle. So therefore, I was asked by our allies at the forum, some of civil society from the United States, to go and represent my people or the cause at that particular. So I represent as an activist. I'm representing my people, and there's no particular left or right. This issue is just clear that we need to issue of justice, as I told you, is a permanent, it's a personal story, but yet it's a broader struggle. In a broader struggle of Namibia that has been unresolved now for many years.
When the descendants of the victims of genocide, German genocide, are fighting abroad like that, you referred to earlier to the case that was lost in New York, and then you continued this quest by now also addressing the UN in Geneva. Does that say something about people not feeling that there's any more room to maneuver locally, and that somehow the only avenue now is abroad?
Yes, I have been in abroad for many years. I've been over 30-something years now, and that is where my struggle emanate from. As I said, come operate from the go to Germany, but there is no avenue. To be honest with you, I have not seen any appetite for the Namibian government to address this issue fully and meaningfully. And at the same time, you have to understand this issue is not necessarily a bilateral issue, it's a multilateral issue. And simply because they are descendants of the victim of 1944 in Botswana, in South Africa, in many countries. So what is the status of these individuals there? They are not citizens, but they are nationals of Botswana. So the unfortunate thing is they left before the formation of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So their status is unclear. And so they have to be inclusive. And this issue has to be addressed in that context. And the Namibian government is not equipped to broaden their issue. So this issue has to be at the United Nations level, has to be at the African Union level, has to be a SADC issue. So this is, from our perspective, this is where we are taking it. And unless the Namibian government come back to us and say, like, this is how we're going to deal with it. But for them and the German government to set up at the table and just say, like, okay, this is what we already prepared for you, it's unacceptable and will never be accepted at all.
Mm. We have seen the attitude of Germany throughout, postulating that they want to it's a state-to-state sort of platform, and that they don't want to deal with indigenous people directly without going through their government. Against that background, how do you think you will make a breakthrough internationally when the avenue for success seems to be here?
Well, you have to understand, when the Germans negotiated with the Jewish at the World Jewish Claim Conference, there were like many groups of Jewish that represented those groups, and so well as the state of Israel. So it is not unusual for Germany to negotiate with groups, but in this case it's simply because maybe we are Africans. And so it's just the arrogance of the German government, an excuse that they're trying to do. And also, for further information, you have to also understand that the Namibian government also approached the African Union when they were dealing with the Germans, and they asked the African Union to facilitate their discussion. So they did. African Union helped them to facilitate that discussion until the Namibian government pulled out from that based on the information I have. So therefore, it is not unusual for Germany and the Namibian state to be willing to negotiate or to include with us at the table. As I said, this is a personal issue, and you cannot negotiate my mother being left under a tree by someone in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs without an inclusive process. And that's why I'm asking for the framework of reparative justice to be clear and open and transparent. And so what's the point of inviting people to go to Berlin? Why can't they negotiate, let's say, at Chuck Island or somewhere where the former concentration camp is? So this background or bedroom negotiation is just what made us lose the trust and confidence in our own government to represent us fully and meaningfully on this issue.
Absolutely. We go for a quick break and return for the last part of the show.
Ohole So Nice is an entertainment show brought to you by the youth for the youth, aimed at having more young people showcase their individual identities. Making a good impression does not come easy. The nerves and the natural way youth interact when it comes to dating, well, this has changed over the years. This is a dating show that allows individuals to participate and be their own true selves. Ohole So Nice focuses on blind date, talk about that, news, flex your style, and more. This show is broadcasted on NTV, 1up2.com, and on the MyZone Facebook platform. To share your experience or make your product or service part of Ohole So Nice, contact Zone at synergy.com.na. Ohole So Nice, because Sabawelling isn't enough.
The show continues. Jephta, what is I think when this deal, this supposed breakthrough with Germany was made last year, our government, climbed on mountain tops to announce this because they thought, this was it. It was a breakthrough. We have won this long struggle, only for the deal to be rejected left, right, and center. What is wrong with that deal?
Well, I mean, if you even read the text, it's very elementary in terms of the substance. And the text also talks about, emphasize more on a bilateral relationship between the two countries, which we already know. And even the question of like, what is it going to be repaired? or restored in terms of the money or the compensation aspect, who are they to decide that? And even I think that's where a lot of people fell in, is because the compensation package is really small, regardless of the process. I mean, let me give you an example. I mean, Germany would say, well, they'll give you $30 million over many years, 30 years, to repair this. Where are they going to store the $1.3 billion? In their banks and get interest. So they will be paying off their interest of that $1.3 billion. So why did it take the Namibian government or representative not to see that this is just a sham or incomplete? Even the founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, made it clear that the package is small given the magnitude of the damage of the genocide in Namibia in terms of land, in terms of other cultural and socio-economic aspect that it has been destroyed. Yeah. So I don't think that the Namibian government was prepared, because I'm sure the German had a lot of lawyers on the other side, and I don't know who represented us on this matter and what lawyers did engage on this matter to come up with such a basic negotiation or joint agreement. Mm-hmm. It's just a very insulting agreement in terms of the substance and the mentalities of it.
Yeah. When you leave your family, you are based in the USA. When you leave your family behind, crossing oceans to go and address international fora to address this issue, I'm sure you would have wanted to spend that time with your family and also the background that you mentioned about your great-grandmother. What is that point? What is that successful sort of, what will represent success for you to say, we have been successful now, I'm now staying home and play with my kids?
It's very difficult, I mean, to claim, to define success, because my goal is from Germany to repair and restore.
Yes.
And they have not done that. And you, as a Namibian, you also see the land issue. You go and buy a bale of grass from the farmer, and while your people are living in reservations, they have no means. So you understand the poverty, and the poverty in Namibia has to do with other many factors. The basic thing is like we don't have land, and this is the first thing they took from us in during the genocide, and this is the first thing that one thing that they're still holding on. So I don't know what the success will be, but one day I'll be able to say like, yes, the German agreed to apologize meaningfully and agreed to give restitution. And we are sitting down and looking at each other and say like, okay, I mean, they feel contrite enough for us to believe that this just genuine negotiation. There is no amount of money that will really repair what happened, but the insulting package that they're trying to offer, or to tell us like, okay, we will give you this, but we are going to give you education, is very insulting. And so unless the Germans and the Namibian government are willing to see us as people who have lost our dignity as a result of genocide, and we have to be heard, and that has to be a comprehensive Namibian approach to this issue that will address it final, then I will be feeling that I am resting. And the process has been inclusive, but yet I will not always get anything what I want from every negotiation as a labor negotiator, but I'm satisfied that my people will be taken care of. And when I mean my people, it will include the Herero, Namibian, and every Namibian in that aspect of negotiation, because the impact of genocide is all vastly felt by anybody in Namibia. So we have to sit down, but we, Namas in the Herero, has to be at the table to articulate our needs and wants.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Jephta, this defense, how do I put, my English is gone now, but government has always said, look, the entire negotiation process has had descendants of the victims. Dr. Nguherimo is a direct descendant of our Herero. There were people from the south also representing the Nama communities. Are those not Hereros and Namas enough?
Well, let me answer that question this way. I don't know that I'm not insulting, but I don't know how old you are. But I remember when the South African government will come and say, like, now we are negotiating about independence, and other political parties, including SWAPO, were left out, and SWAPO will say, no, this process is not clear because we are not at the table. Yeah. So they could be they have been heroes in the process, but what process took place in that to engage? The late Dr. Nguherimo was announced. It was not really the community that chose him to be envoy. And the team that surrounded him, who knows how they were created, even though they are heroes. So that's why I'm calling for the process to be transparent. And if you go to the reparatory justice framework, what I'm calling for at the United Nations, or what we are going to be advocating for many months to come, is the process that has to be open and the field have to be level for us to engage meaningfully. We cannot take this briefcase negotiation of Germany coming over here and putting people at the Safari Hotel negotiating and go out. They have to look us in the eye and say, like, okay, this is what we have to feel part of the process. The first process that was not inclusive of everybody, of us, and so therefore it doesn't count.
I don't know whether you've been following from the U.S. where you are based, but late last year there was a Chiefs Forum that was held in Windhoek, chaired by Vice President Nangola Mbumba, and sections of the traditional authorities stayed away. Paramount Chief Mushinde Kashiwa was one of those who did not show up, and a number of other traditional authorities, calling it a sham conference. How do we get the communities back into this space where they can now engage with government? Because the communities have their demands, fair demands, to be honest. But if the communication has broken down completely between these communities and government, which has placed itself at the forefront of this process, how are we going to do it?
The issue of, in a way, you are asking, well, about the so-called division within among the hero leadership, which in a certain extent is true, certain extent is not true. And I'd really answer that question, but everybody or every group of people that have gone through that traumatic experience of the genocide will always have this disagreement. And how do we get together? It's not about those individuals coming together. It is about the process and the framework. If there's like a 10 principle or 12 or 15 principle, this is what the conditions that need to be met. Then people will rally around those conditions. Yeah. Or the principles of negotiation, or framework of negotiation, whatever you call it. And that is what is going to unite us. It's hard. Traditional leaders are political leaders. It's hard to unite political leaders. And so it's just like the same in Namibia. The political parties are divided. So what is different from them? But they are not the same. The main issue here, the main issue is for the German government to use so-called division and to distract from the main focus, which is pay reparation. And the main is a distraction used by the Namibian government to distract people like, oh, how can we negotiate where people are not so divided? Why is it we're such a democratic community, highly democratized? Why do you think that we have to have a monolithic view or approach to everything? But what we have is like justice needs to be done and restitution must be paid, and in the context and in appropriate or within with the magnitude of the genocide. So there is no disagreement about that. And you will be surprised that there were chiefs, as you call, some of them were with the government, but then when they saw the package, they said, no, we don't agree, because they know what they want. It's not that they don't know what they want. They wanted to give the government a chance to prove itself, but the government failed completely. And so the issue of disunity is just a distraction from the main focus. I don't really pay much attention to that, but what we have to do, what I say to my people, we have to develop a framework that the one I'm asking the United Nations to prepare for us, or to advance for people of African descent to advance their interest when addressing these issues.
Absolutely. Jephta, thank you very much for making time. It has been
thank you very much to you. And have heard your work, and I'm so impressed with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. That was Jephta Nguherimo. He's based in the USA, and he's been fighting and making his own contribution towards the fight for reparations regarding German genocide in Namibia. Thank you for watching.